Okay, everybody. So, welcome to the introduction to transformative healing in community. So, this class is a little bit of an experiment. This is the first time I'm doing a class that's quite like this. And the reason is a lot of times I do immersion classes where each class progressively builds, right, in terms of content. And the class can be taken like that, where if you've never done a class with me before, where each class will build on the others. Earlier classes will be foundational practices and concepts and principles. And then the later classes will be more advanced things or more advanced topics. And by advanced, I just mean things that more or less anybody can do, but that will be built on prior classes. The reason I'm doing it as like a buffet style class, where if you really wanted to, you could just sign up for class 11 or 12 that, next quarter when the classes are going on. The reason I'm doing it like that is because a lot of you have taken classes with me in the past, and sometimes people just need a refresher on, for example, how do you get to the bottom of a mental model or a core belief? And what do you do when you're at the bottom of a core belief? Some classes will be focused on that. Okay. And after this class, I'll get you a full menu of what each class is going to focus on and that sort of thing. The earlier classes are going to be some of the essential practices of embodied non-dual meditation, specifically using realization process and some other similar somatic kinds of practices, like from emotional resolution, where if you experience a triggering emotion, how do you just let that pass through your body? Or how do you let it pass through your mind-body system in a way where it clears, and then you can feel clearer in approaching whatever the issue is without feeling super triggered. Okay. We're also going to be doing some classes on how to experience chakras and that sort of thing. So that's the setup. It's a buffet style class. You can take any class that you want. You can also take them all in order. And you can take it as just a membership where it's going to be like a fitness class where you're going to learn a bunch of stuff, and your mind body system is going to be more spiritually and emotionally fit or healthy afterwards, right? Cleared out and so forth. Bright, shiny, cleared out, luminous, divinely imbued, or whatever. Okay. Any questions on that? If any of that is not clear in terms of how the first 12 weeks of the new year are going to kick off for these Wednesday classes called Transformative Healing and Community. Any questions on the structure or the layout? Okay. So some of the classes that I do with folks involve one-on-ones, like intensive one-on-ones where you're in the hot seat for a half hour or so, and we're doing some deconditioning work, right? This class, it won't be one of those classes, but if you have something that you want to resolve, then we can spend a little bit of time on that. If for whatever class you're in, if you approach me with something that pertains to that topic that day, even loosely, we can do some work on it for 5-10 minutes, whatever it is, and whatever it is that's going to help you get the essence of the principle and learn how to apply it for yourself. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. And so I wanted today's class to really be an introduction in a way for all other 12 classes. And that's going to be a little bit of a challenge for me, but also maybe not, because I've been doing this for a while. And I think it's actually both spiritual awakening practices and psychological healing practices are actually pretty straightforward. And they, in a large part, happen by way of getting into what we call the felt sense. Who here is familiar with that term, the felt sense? You can just raise your hands or virtual hands. Yeah, okay. And does anybody want to define what that is, the felt sense? Anyone want to take a shot? It's a word that comes from Eugene Genlin. I think he introduced it in his book, Focusing. I think that's the first place where it appeared. All right, any takers on this? All right, I guess old ML will give a definition here. So the felt sense refers to the kind of gestalt of feelings and sensations, and also feeling knowings that we experience in the internal space of the body, or we experience, if you're more sensitive, you could say that our extended energy field is also the domain of the felt sense. Some of you who are sensitive experience physical or subtle physical sensations beyond your body. Has anybody had experiences with that? The felt sense, you could say that there are some meditation practices that are, in a way, purely transcendent. They aim to tune your attention away from physical sensations and away from the senses, you could say. And the realization process practices and other meditations that I guide that are similar to that, those practices help you integrate your physical senses or your physical sensations and perceptions, as well as subtle energy perceptions, with an experience of a ground of being. And we could say that the experience of a ground of being is, at first, we experience that by, in this work, by going into our felt sense, by experiencing all the, we could say the energetic levels of our being. And deeper than that is just a sense of presence that feels like it is steady. It's there in the background already. It's something that we can tune into by opening to or settling back into. And we can allow all of our senses to be there at the same time without getting too caught up in them. And as we settle back into that sense of presence or pure beingness, we can notice a subtle boundary or a kind of contraction that lives at our, it's a mixture of our maybe feeling level and our being level. It feels like a contraction that defines our localized being, okay? And when we rest beneath that, we get to a sense of what I would just call a sense of existence, right? A sense of pure existence that feels self-luminous, okay? And by self-luminous, it's a sense of being luminous that, to me, I seem to, it's hard to explain how, to me, I feel it in the back of my brain. It's like a light comes on, and it's a light that's more felt than it is seen, but it's the light of a kind of boundless consciousness that is there in the background. It doesn't change or move like the other contents of the mind-body system. And also emerging from this sense of pure existence or pure consciousness, you could call it pure consciousness. To me, I've been using the term existence a lot because it has this kind of foundational quality to it. When we talk about consciousness, sometimes we think about up here. When I'm talking about pure existence, it's something that almost feels like it holds up all of our cells, or all the energies of our being. Even the very physical energies of our being, like in our lower chakras, they feel like they're held up by this sense of pure existence. Does that make sense to everybody and or jive with your experience? Okay. All right. So that is as simple as it can be said in terms of how to do the essential kind of pathway into embodied non-dual realization. You allow your faculties to sink into that level of just pure self-luminous existence. And then out of that, we can feel all sorts of different qualities co-emerging in the body, different qualities of various chakra points. And you could say that each chakra center also, it has its energetic level and it has its, you could call it a being level, or a level that is maybe a mixture of the energetic level and a being level. Because, for example, our quality of love, we can't like make that go away. It's always going to be there in the background because it's what we are. Does it make sense to everybody? When we're talking about self-realization, we're talking about uncovering a level of ourselves versus imagining something or using, what is it? It's not like we're using law of attraction to manifest something. We're uncovering something that's already there. There's nothing wrong with manifesting practices. I'm not poo-pooing those or anything like that. I'm just saying that we're getting into a different domain of being when we uncover that essential self or that essential ground. Does it make sense to everybody? The felt sense, uncovering our felt sense, is both the gateway to non-dual realization in the way that I teach these classes anyway. And it's the gateway to undoing or resolving blockages or you could say constrictions that exist in our mind-body energy system, constrictions that we feel in the body, in the fascia, which is like the connective tissue throughout the body and the brain, as well as our energy system. Does anybody have blockages or energy blocks that you're aware of that you'd want to resolve in this class or any class? Okay, in general, in your life? Okay. Yeah, yeah, I do too. Okay. One of the things that I really want to make simple for everybody, at least in my view, is how these blockages are organized and how you can resolve them. Okay, because the more that we can resolve these constrictions, which you could say that a lot of the constrictions are, the constriction is like the top level or the surface level of whether it's emotion that's held that we don't want to be aware of at some level, or it's some faculty that we don't want to, how would I put this? A faculty that's constricted, a faculty that's constrained because we weren't allowed to use that faculty, or if we did use that faculty, we'd get into trouble. For example, a family where you experienced a lot of gaslighting and you weren't allowed to see things, right? If you saw something as it was, then maybe you get severely punished or something like that. Somebody that has that kind of history, and maybe if they have a constriction in their eyes, for example, I've read examples of this, or Judith Blackstone has talked about examples of this in her work with people. Some people have constrictions in their eyes because they're constricting a faculty. In my experience working with folks, sometimes there's a constriction in our throat if we feel like we can't admit something to ourselves or somebody else. Or the heart is one of those areas that gets constricted a lot because we feel like we're blocked from loving ourselves, or we feel like we're not allowed to even have a self or have love or that sort of thing. And so the blockage that we experience is really the expression, or it's downstream from what we could call a core belief or a mental model that lives in the domain of the felt sense. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. And so there are specific practices and techniques that we'll be doing in this class, and some inquiry and insight work that we'll be doing in some of the classes that will aim to uncover specific mental models that, although they're not true fundamentally, and maybe already in our adult spiritually informed awareness, we know that they're not true, but there's some part of us that still is holding on to them for some reason or another. Okay. And it's important to know what that reason or purpose is. And that purpose is also something that's, again, it lives in the felt sense. It's a nonverbal kind of, you could call it a knowing, a belief, a nonverbal kind of feeling knowing. Not, when I say knowing, I have to be careful there because it's not something that's objectively true, but it feels as if it's objectively real to a child part of the mind. Does that track with everybody's experience? Okay. So I know I've just said a lot. Are there any questions so far before we move forward? Is anybody raising their hand? Oh, Lenny, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, what if the sensation is more whole body?
That is a
Does it
great,
like usually have a focal point, or
that is, oh, go
if
ahead.
I have an experience of that involves worthlessness and shame, but I feel it in my whole body. It's like kind of a shrinking.
Mm-hmm. So the most reliable theory that I have found about how that works, right? It's not that you're lacking vitamins and that's why you're experiencing so much shame. To me, that it sounds like some sort of emotional learning. And my kind of go-to framing for doing further detective work on that is that it's downstream from something. The shame, even if it's a full body experience, sometimes it's not a constriction as a specific blockage. Sometimes it's a full body experience, like you just mentioned. And my question would be like, okay, that's a response or it's an effect. What is it a response to? Right.
Okay.
And so that's where we would begin the exploration. And one distinction that I want to make, and that I'll be reinforcing throughout the classes that talk about mental models, is that sometimes we have views of our psychological growth, our spiritual growth, that something happened in the past, and that is the cause of why we're suffering right now. And this, I hope this distinction does not sound pedantic. That is the source, right? Things that happened in the past, okay, yes, those events were the source. Now, the cause is what is happening right now in the present. the cause is something. For example, Lenny, in your case, I would hold as a frame that there's something, some view, probably a view of self that is generating that shame, or an internalized view that somebody held towards you that just makes that heavy sense of shame that's ongoing a response.
Okay.
But it's
Perpetuates it.
yeah, and why that happens is because there's a view that's happening in the present that you're holding right now. And it's the source of it was in the past, the cause is in the present. Does that make sense to everybody? Because if something is held as true about us, a view that something is true about us, that is a timeless experience. Okay, let's go ahead and try something, right? I'm going to invite everybody to go ahead to the degree that you can do this. Okay. I'm going to invite you to just imagine for a second, if this isn't already your experience. Actually, let's do it this way. I'm going to invite everybody to tune into your quality of self, whatever that feels like to you. Okay. And this is the qualitative sense of I am. Mm-hmm. Can we find, Lenny, I guess I'll talk to you here first. Can you find anything intrinsically bad in that experience?
Nope.
Okay. So then would it be okay for that to land? Or does something feel like it's not allowing for that to land?
Yeah. 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 It's a sense of being disconnected from something.
Okay.
Ooh. Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would invite you to just inquire into what that is, because I, this is the intro class, so it's not, I can't go too deep right now, but I would invite you to just keep inquiring into that and see what it is, what that disconnection really
That's good
means.
because it's new information. Thank you.
Good. Yep. In my experience, non-dual practices help us get glimpses or openings to our true self or to the ground of our being, both and, or to divinity, depending on what we're doing. And I'll explain the differences between those in a little while. And what, in my view, allows them to really land, to allow all those experiences of unconditional love and true self and all of that. What allows all of it to land is this kind of mental models work where we resolve things that are resisting our own happiness and well-being. Right. So does that make sense to everybody? Okay. All right. Just to round off this point about about how schemas that are viewed as true, let's say a view of ourselves that we have as true or false, as timeless experiences. Okay. For some of you, maybe there's some switch in your mind body system that says, yeah, I can feel my quality of self. It feels fundamentally good. And so the notion of having a fundamentally good self or sense of being, that switch is turned to on or true, right? That our core sense of being is fundamentally good. That switch is turned to true. Okay. If you were constantly denigrated as a young child, or if you got other messages that told you that you were bad, whether direct or or indirect, implicit, but something that your family still acted out at you, then the switch of I am good, right? I'm fundamentally good. That switch is turned to false. Okay. And that switch being turned to false is a timeless experience. Until it switches to true, you will keep experiencing some background emotion of the anxiety, the low self-worth, the shame, whatever it is, that is an effect of that switch being turned to false. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. All right. Good. Okay. Are there any questions before we get into just a meditation exercise so I can break up some of all the talking just, yeah, so we can do some intro meditation exercises. All right. And just as one final point of the discussion, some of the most difficult experiences that I think we can have as human beings. One of those is self-love, and the other is being able to let our guard down and experience love or care from another person. And so my hope is that this healing and community class will be that. There have been classes that I've facilitated before where at the end of it, one of the participants had said, what I got out of this class was that I came here just having a feeling of love for everybody in the class. And to me, that was worth more in some ways than all the non-dual technical stuff. Or in other words, it made all the non-dual technical stuff that I've learned over the years really worth it. Okay, so that's my hope for this class, that we can all get out of that as an experience if you decide to take it, or if you decide to take any one of them. Does that sound okay to anybody that have more love in your life? Okay. Okay, good. Mm-hmm. Let's go ahead and just take a moment to settle back into the internal space of your body. Okay. And to do that, if you've never done this before, you can just feel, you can actually feel the energies of your thinking mind. Usually we feel that towards the front part of the internal space of our head. Feel the energies of the thinking mind. Okay. So I'm going to invite everybody to engage your feeling sense. See if you can begin to feel the space that's behind your thinking mind. That there's actually space in the internal space of the head. And we can feel it as a depth. And we can just turn on this whole body feeling sense, or tune in to this whole body feeling sense. It's like we're directing or allowing ourselves to feel the whole inner depth of the body at the same time. It's not that we're looking inside the body with the thinking mind. See if you can just settle and rest your attention into the textural level of feeling. The internal space of the body feels and knows itself. Kind of consciousness that is deeper than the thinking mind. right. If your mind still feels like it's looking around for what to do, just let the energies of your mind settle, right? So that you're settling from being aware of your body into the sense of being present through your whole body. And so, one of the things that we can do from here is tune into different qualities that are part of this sense of being or presence that suffuses our body. Okay. So I'm going to invite everybody to settle into the internal space of your chest. And to open your feeling sense to the core level of your emotional life in your chest. And so for many of us, we're going to feel that as the heart center above the lower part of the sternum, roughly at the depth of the inner part of the spine. And so again, we're not looking down at this point, but rather opening our feeling sense from within the point. See if you can notice a kind of love or sweetness that's already there in the background of your heart center. And this is different than exercises where we generate compassion. Okay. What we're doing is just tuning in, finding a quality of love or sweetness that is already there. You might feel it as love, sweetness, gentleness, caring, even if it's not towards a particular object. Okay. Good. All right. Yeah. Yep. And you might be noticing, as I am right now, the vibe of the room changing a little bit as we tune into this particular quality of being. Okay. Now, because this is a quality of being and not a quality of energy that we're going to project, okay, continue to settle into your quality of love or that quality of warmth that you feel in the core of your heart center, whatever that is. Okay, allow yourself to just settle into that quality and then go ahead and allow that quality to be what lives through your whole body. The whole internal space of the body now resonates, or we could say is colored, yeah, resonates with the frequency of the heart center. It resonates as that frequency. This doesn't have to be fireworks. This is a subtle experience, and that's fine. It might feel settling, relaxing, soothing, gentle. So I know we're doing this virtually. Some of you have your eyes closed, which is fine. I'm going to invite you all to assume that we're all sitting in a circle, or to imagine that we're all in a circle together. And we're just going to allow our heart centers, without coming out of ourselves or projecting our energies, we're going to allow our heart centers to resonate with the heart centers of everybody else. Okay, so we're just going to come into a deeper resonance here. You might notice that opening at this level of yourself already feels like an unwounded, uncontracted level of being that coexists with whatever contractions you might have in your mind body system. They can both exist at the same time. Okay. I'm going to invite everybody just to take some time to feel nurtured and supported by the field here and by the resonance of our heart centers, the resonance of gentleness and the sense of caring, sweetness, warmth. Right. So there's one more optional step if you'd like to take it, which is this. If you feel like there's some harshness that your energy system has internalized over the years, okay, see if you can feel that now as an imprint in your energy system that you've taken on, wherever you feel it in your body. And just allow the gentleness, the sense of natural caring that comes from our being level or the radiance of the soul, depending on how you want to think about it. Allow that nurturing radiance to meet the sense of harshness in your system. Okay, so it's like we're allowing one field to meet the other. We're allowing the sense of nurturance of this heart chakra resonant field. We're allowing that nurturance to meet the sense of harshness in our energy system. And just see how that goes for you. Sometimes we have conditions around when we're able to receive love or caring. And so I'm just going to invite everybody to inquire in yourself how it feels to you that you don't have to do anything to get this experience. There's no specific requirement upon you in order to receive caring or nurturance in this moment. Just by existing, you get to have it. And just for existing, you deserve it. You don't need to have perfect behavior. You don't need to meet any religious or spiritual standard right now. You don't need to be in a role where you're taking care of anybody else. And just for existing, you get to have this with no conditions attached. Let's do one last check with our systems to see if that feels fully okay, that we get to have this with no conditions attached. And also, although we might feel that nurturing quality radiate from core of the heart center, we can allow it to touch into anywhere in our mind body system or any experience that we've had. Okay. But let's take a moment and just once again settle into the internal space of your body. Knowing that this is available to you whenever you need it. And little by little, you can come back to your ordinary state of consciousness. Okay. Everybody all right? Okay. Any questions, comments, or feedback on this exercise? Lenny, go ahead.
Yeah, I sometimes have trouble staying with it. Is that something that helps with practice? I'd like to be able to have a sense of nurtured, even if it's being nurtured, even if it's being self-nurtured.
Mm-hmm. And you're saying that it's hard to stay with that?
Yeah, yeah. It's almost there's an injunction that it's
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Give me just 1 second with that. How would you give words to the injunction if you feel comfortable sharing?
I can't trust myself. I can't trust anyone else.
What's at stake if you do? And you don't, and if it's too personal, you
Yeah,
don't have to tell the group, but do you have an awareness of that for yourself?
yeah. It's some kind of safety.
Some
Yeah,
kind of safety. Yeah.
yeah.
So part of you anticipates that something unsafe will happen. Okay.
Yeah, either because I have relaxed or because I've stepped outside of the system, I've stepped outside of what's permitted.
In your adult mind, did any big calamity happen during this meditation? Because it sounds like part of you is anticipating that if you let your guard down, something really bad's going to happen. I don't
Yeah,
know.
no.
Maybe maybe Michael will, I don't know, all of a sudden flip out and say something mean, or
Yeah,
somebody will.
no,
I don't know. I don't know what
no.
the specific fear is.
Yeah.
Yeah. But something will happen that will be such a rupture of trust that comes out of nowhere, and somebody will just do something awful to you, something like that.
Yeah. It's what my system expects.
Yes. In your adult mind,
Yeah, but yeah,
in your adult mind, does it resonate that didn't happen?
yeah,
Oh,
yes,
okay. So then
yes.
the question is, okay, so then the frame is something like this. It sounds like you're okay. I wonder if part of you is holding on to that, not because it's objectively true, but because holding the view that could happen at any moment. It's like, how would I put this? It's that is an extreme, it's part of an extreme response to an extreme pattern that you experienced. Does that resonate?
Say it again.
It's an extreme response to an extreme pattern that you
Yeah,
experienced. Okay.
yes.
All right. Yeah. And so the sort of bookmark that I'm just going to put here is that, yeah, we form extreme responses to extreme experiences or unpredictable behavior that other people have. And one part of undoing a pattern like that, yeah, it is practice and it's allowing that part of you to learn that's just, it's not going to happen that way, or it doesn't happen that way. And just without forcing, inviting that young part of you to allow it to land. That is one part of it, and to develop trust. Another part of it is, and this speaks to the whole group too, because we all have patterns inside of us that say, oh yeah, all that love and light stuff, that feels great, but blank, right? We all have a but about that type of thing. And that's where I feel like that's where I've landed in terms of what I help people with, is first off, feeling into our felt sense, feeling into that domain of like gut level knowings or presumptions about what's going to happen. Like Lenny mentioned, okay, if I just let my guard down, something really bad's going to happen to me, and I have to protect myself from that. Okay, so it's, and part of us might already know we don't believe that because it's objectively true. We believe it because it's protective. It's an extreme means of protection. It's part of an extreme means of protection to an extreme pattern of events that were unsafe. Okay. That already allows us to say, okay, now I just need to help my system learn that extreme pattern of events. It's something that one person was doing, and not the whole world doesn't do that to me. And a lot of times it's not just, what would you call it? It's not just a survival response, like a physical survival response. There is some attachment that's involved. For example, what makes us, I know this is going to sound weird, maybe, but what makes us feel vulnerable to that specific thing, a lot of times, is feeling as if not just that it's going to happen, but that we deserve it in some way. And because we deserve it, that's what gives us the kind of close-up intimacy to this, not maybe intimacy is the wrong word, but the sort of close-up sense that something at any time could really happen to me and it would be so bad and I have to protect myself against it. But we never feel like we're fully protected because part of us feels deserving of it. I don't know. Does that make sense, Lenny, at all? Or
Yes,
track with your
absolutely.
experience? Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay. All right. So that's the kind of, this meditation is like a demo of the blending of practices and approaches that I want to help people cultivate and understand for yourselves. Okay. And dovetailing off of the email that I sent you all about this class, basically there's three things that I want to talk about in this program and help people cultivate a relationship with. One thing is your unconscious mind. Okay. Now, we could think about our ordinary state of consciousness as like a room. And there are doors that lead into the room that where certain experiences enter. Who can maybe just guess at what some of those doors might be in terms of domains that sort of flow into our ordinary conscious awareness? What might one of those doors be from? Does anybody want to take a guess? Hi, Gabrielle, by the way. Anyone want to take a guess? It's not gonna.
Okay, could you state the question again?
Sure. If we think about our ordinary awareness as a room that has doors, that's where things enter and exit, what might some of those doors be? I know this is my metaphor, so maybe it's a weird question to ask everybody, but
They're doors about connection, they're doors about competence,
Mhm.
they're doors about who I am with others.
Mhm. Yes. All right. And I'm going to make this my responsibility because maybe I didn't clarify this analogy well.
Okay.
I'm just going to tell you what my view of the doors is. Yes. I so this is just how I think about it. Um, some of the doors, like one door is like present moment. What is happening in the present moment? And that's what sort of feeds into our present emotional state. For example, if you are experiencing anxiety because you're having a shortage of money and that's what's happening in the present moment, then that's what makes sense of that experience of anxiety, right? It's not like a childhood trauma or anything like that. The experience of anxiety, if you do have a childhood trauma around money, then it's going to exacerbate that anxiety. But there is one door that is the present moment, and another door, which is mental models. And Lenny, I think that speaks to what you were talking about. It's models about how, like, who we are in relation to others, models about connection, models of safety. So that is one of the doors that I think that what I'm calling a door in this extended metaphor. And so we could say that what flows from that door into our conscious awareness, we often don't know exactly what's behind the door until we look. Often what comes through the door are just top level emotional states. For example, when we experience connection with somebody, it feels good in some way, but all of a sudden we feel afraid. So that's what comes through the door of the unconscious mind. Now, there's also, and by the way, when I'm saying unconscious mind, I just mean things that are not integrated. I don't mean things that are like some mysterious thing that we'll never figure out. Just mean things that are not integrated in present moment awareness, fears, and so forth. Okay, and so then there's the door of higher consciousness, or the door of, you could say, non-dual experiences. And then I don't know whether it's a different door or just whatever. Every analogy is imperfect. But there's also the door of divinity. We can experience a steady state, background, self-luminous, boundless existence. That seems to be what people are talking about when they're talking about non-duality. Is this consistent with everybody else's notion of non-duality? Okay. When that experience, or as that experience proceeds more and more to the foreground, and you have just a natural sense of clarity of mind, you have a natural sense of caring about yourself and others, and you're just a natural ability to allow that in. When you have a sense of like feeling held by something that's much deeper than you, that's hard to explain, but this is like the physical, palpable quality of the field, right? The more that comes to your ordinary awareness, the more that we could say that you're stabilized in non-duality, right? And the more that your experience becomes just like a flow where you don't think about yourself. It's the wrong way to say it, where you don't have self-consciousness anymore. You don't have like negative self-consciousness, and you're not obsessing over yourself like the way you do when you're a teenager, right? That's what people call non-duality, right? Does that sound okay to everybody? Okay. All right. So then that experience of the self-luminous field that is your ground of being, and that you can realize as your fundamental sense of ordinary being also, that to me seems different than what I'm going to call divinity. Okay. There was one night where I was praying and didn't really have any expectations. My heart was just open, and something answered back. Okay. And that did not feel like a steady state field. It felt like an active presence and power. Has anybody experienced anything that matches that description? An active presence and power that you could feel unconditionally loved you, and it was a life-changing experience. Anybody?
Nice.
I'm sorry?
That would be really nice.
That would be really nice. Okay. So here's the difference between, so I wanted to, the last thing that I really wanted to get into today, theory-wise, that we'll get into this last bit of theory and then we'll do another final meditation and then we'll call it a wrap, is this. To me, the integrated spiritual path seems to be made of those three elements. It's made of more than that, because the implicit premise is that you want your everyday relationships to feel good. You want to feel good about who you are and how you move through the world, and you want to have a sense that light upholds the darkness, and that you can to feel confident with moving ahead, whatever your life purpose or soul contract is. That's my spiritual orientation, and I assume that everybody else here probably has something close to that, right? You just want to feel good about yourself and how you move through the world, and you want to feel good in your relationships and all of that. Does that sound terrible to anybody, or does that sound okay? All right. Okay, cool. So for me, there's three different elements that all have a different logic to them. One element is resolving schemas, conditioning, as they call it in the non-dual and spiritual marketplace, trauma-based imprints and self-limiting patterns that originate from the unconscious mind in the present. Okay, that follows its own rule set. And maybe I'll explain the non-duality rule set before I circle back to that one. The non-duality rule set is something like this. Essentially, it's this. The more time you spend doing exercises like raising a subtle channel of energy through your chakras or sinking in to that steady state underlying field of pure luminous existence, and the more that you sink into and realize that you are that field or you're one with that field, the more that you do that, the more that you stabilize in non-duality, the more you can rest and release and so on and so forth, the more that becomes part of your ordinary awareness. And there is an active training or attunement element to that, right? The more that you do that, the more it reorganizes your whole system in a particular way, okay? That's something that you do relatively have under your control, under conscious control, because you can relax your system to whatever degree and feel some degree of that luminosity in the background, and it feels really nice. And so that's the logic. The more you tune into it, the more you experience it, okay? So that's one bucket, right? The other bucket works differently, the unconscious mind. So to circle back to that, it's because in a way, the things that emerge out of the doorway from the unconscious mind into ordinary awareness are not immediately affected by non-dual and other spiritual knowings. Okay? If they were, then there would be virtually no classes on deconditioning, and you wouldn't have people struggling to understand why it is that they have experiences of fundamental well-being and can't maintain them. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, good. So basically, the logic behind the unconscious mind is as follows. When we have shame, or when we have anything from pervasive shame and self-doubt to procrastination symptoms to schemas of low self-worth, anything within that range, some of those symptoms are responses that do not have a function. For example, if you feel a lack of motivation, that might not have any direct functioning. But if you feel a sense of being no good underneath that, right? Usually low self-worth always has a function. And in order to stop having low self-worth symptoms, you need to be aware of what the function of those symptoms actually is, or what the function of that schema actually is. And you need to be willing to let it go, or you need to be willing to or you just need to see that it's no longer relevant, right? It was sometimes we align with low self-worth patterns because that's how we survive in our early relationships. And so the low self-worth pattern isn't objectively true. It was just a skillful means of surviving a specific period in time in our childhood where we really didn't feel like we had any other option. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. And to some primal part of the mind, it still feels true that we're no good or that sort of thing. And you could say part of our consciousness still might feel as if it has all the vulnerabilities of that specific age. And so sometimes it's just a matter of helping us realize that we're not in that space and time and ego state and vulnerability, and that those don't exist in the same way anymore. And really having that experience of, it's like you're shining a light on that switch at that unconscious level of the mind that says, oh, I'm bad, or something like that. And that switch is turned to true. Once we flip that switch to false, right, then there's a shift in our emotional state, right? It trickles all the way up to our ordinary level of awareness. The reason that non-dual experiences do not in and of themselves dissolve unconscious patterns, or at least a good deal of unconscious patterns, is that you're shining, that all of a sudden it's like the skylight opens, right? And it's so beautiful and all this luminosity is coming in. And at the same time, it's not shining down into the basement. It doesn't do that unless we open the basement door. Yeah? Okay. Does that intuitively make sense to everybody? Okay. Okay, good. So I hope that logic is clear. Basically, to recap, the logic of non-dual spiritual awakening is that you sink in and just more or less like building a muscle over time, your mind-body system reorganizes itself around that experience and it becomes just part of the background into the foreground. And the logic of deconditioning is that you have to bring things from an unconscious feeling level of awareness into your conscious mind and make them go from, true to false or false to true, however you want to look at it. For example, the switch that is turned to true about I'm no good has to get turned to false in a way that feels good through and through, in a way where that there's no other tendril of the unconscious mind pinning that switch to true. Okay. So in other words, okay. So just very briefly, because I want to just make sure that this is totally clear. One of my clients was wondering about if she'd ever be free from this inner terrorizer. Okay. This pattern where she felt like it was this almost like an inner terrorizer that wouldn't allow her to have a certain amount of power or success in life or the ability to stand up for herself in certain relationships, especially with women. And the long story short is that when we inquired into what the purpose of that terrorizer was, it was to, and this is like from when she was 2 years old, she internalized a view of herself that somehow she destroyed the lives of some people in her family. Okay. And it was because of her power that she was able to do that. This is a child's mind and a very primal part of the mind's logic about things. Once she was able to just integrate that into conscious awareness, she already had so much adult knowledge that told her, no, that's not true. And she saw the function of it. She saw that it was no longer necessary. She had all the other parts needed, or all the other elements needed to know that that wasn't true. And poof, that it was like a night and day thing after that session where it was like she had a sea change moment that has lasted until that has been permanent up until now. It was like a permanent shift, or a shift that's been ongoing since a few years ago when she made that shift. So that's the logic of the unconscious mind. We have to integrate things that we've internalized out of unconscious awareness, out of this nonverbal feeling level into a conscious verbal level and see that they're not true, or see that they're no longer true or relevant. Okay. The rules for divinity are a little bit different than the other two. The rules for encountering divinity have to do with both a special kind of openness that we have. You could call it an openness and faith or trust. And this, I went to Catholic school, not by choice, when I was in 7th and 8th grade. And I really had a difficult time there. and, uh, and I don't like, and there's part of me that still doesn't, I don't like saying this because it sounds religious in some sense, but it's been my life experience, so I can't argue with it. It really does feel like the door from divinity into our ordinary awareness, that seems to happen from its own side. And I don't know exactly what that means. If someone said, Michael, you have to bet $1 on what the experience of divinity is, I think that all of our souls are like emanations of spiritual light from one source. And there is some, you could call it volition, that source level of consciousness has maintained that whereby it knows itself as itself. And you could say that both views are true, that it's a very deep level of our own being and that it's its own thing. It's own autonomous entity. I don't know what to call it, field, whatever it is. It's seemingly the source of all creation. And because it has something like its own autonomy, it can reach into our mind body, it can shine its light into our mind body system and it's an amazing life-changing experience, but one that we don't control. Okay, I think that's the punchline there. It's one that the door opens from the other side. And that's the difference between non-duality and the experience of divinity, is the experience of divinity really opens from its own side for reasons that can feel really elusive or mysterious. Even if we're just as open as we were in the past, sometimes it's there and sometimes it's not, and it's mysterious. I don't know. I don't know what to make of it. But I'm being honest about how I experience these things. And I feel like I've just been talking for an awful long time. Does anybody want to share your experiences? If you've felt anything like this in the past, or can relate to what I'm saying in any way? Lenny, go ahead.
Not so much, but it sounds almost like this experience. It's like when religions talk about grace.
Yep, that's it. Mm-hmm. Yep, yep. Yeah, that's it. It's a form of grace.
Okay.
Yeah, it's something.
Um,
Now, qualitatively, we know our imagination. Let's everybody, let's everybody imagine for a second. Corinne, I'll get to you in one sec. Let's everybody imagine a green triangle. Okay. All right. All right. Now dissolve the green triangle. All right. And now imagine whatever comes to your mind, right? Imagine God for a minute. Let's imagine God. And imagine that God loves you and is smiling at you with loving energy. Okay. Unless you want to keep it around for now, let the image of God go. Okay. So the reason that I wanted to do that is to calibrate us to the power of what our imagination can do. Okay. Just to make things more confusing, sometimes we do visualizations and it opens us to deeper levels of being, but we can qualitatively feel that they're different than imagining the green triangle and dispersing the green triangle. The point of that exercise was to calibrate us to what our imagination can do and what is beyond our imagination. When we feel that steady state field of luminosity that's in the background that feels like it's just pure unbound existence, that is beyond our imagination. The feeling of it, the texture of it, the whole experience of it, beyond the imagination, right? It's already there. It's not something that we're actively doing. When grace comes through in a more active way, is known, like we know it to be something much more profound and deeper than what our imagination can do, what our ordinary emotional state can do, right? We all experienced our heart centers before, tuning into love, feeling that love saturate the room. And my experience of divinity, one of the ones I'm thinking of, it was just so much more than what my ordinary mind body system could do. Okay, so that's how you know it. And other people might have different words for divinity, or they might have it mean different things, or they might call that self-luminous field part of divinity, which probably is. But there's also the active side of it, right? And you know it when you feel it. Corinna, what were you going to say?
What you're saying sounds lovely. I had a question to the other two, because I hear that door of divinity is something you cannot control, but the other two you can. So how would you say are those two things, like how do they go together and how are they influencing each other? Because I feel like I cannot open the door at the basement and on the roof at the same time. Somehow I feel like when I'm practicing or when I'm doing like coherence therapy, then it's hard for me to find this space in practice. It's like also right now when we did the first exercise, I felt like I could really feel the love and the space and everyone in the room. But then when you said that we should shift the focus to this part, if there is any that feels uncomfortable, then this took completely over. And then, I don't know how to do it, like how to combine those two things.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So in your experience, what happened was it just very quickly switched over and then you all of a sudden didn't have access to the warmth anymore?
Yeah, so I felt the whole time I felt that there is a little part that is very painful, and I could blend it out. I'm not sure if this is the right expression, but not focus on it. And then I just focused really on the love. But when I tried to let those two meet,
Mm-hmm.
then yeah, the love was basically gone.
So my first suspicion, or the first go-to question that I would have for you or anybody who told me that was your experience would be something like this. If you imagined yourself, you don't have to actually feel what you're going to imagine on this screen right now, but if you imagine like a TV screen where there's part of you that has internalized some pain or harshness in your life, and that part of you is allowing these finer frequencies of energy to nurture and hold and comfort. What happens? If you imagine that, how do you respond to that as you're imagining it?
Mm. Mm. I feel so much pain, something must be wrong with me, and I will not be able to feel this nurturing sense because something must be completely wrong with me.
Is the view that something, so I just want to understand the order of things. Is it you can see yourself allowing one field to meet the other, like this nurturing quality to meet your contraction? You can start to feel that, but then you feel pain. And then there's a judgment that comes in that says, oh, there's something must be wrong with me because I feel pain. Is that how it works?
Mm. I think the pain just reminds me of that something is wrong with me because I have always felt a lot of pain in my physical body, like throughout my whole existence, and never heard something like this from other people in my surroundings. So if I want to tune into this love and then this pain is there as a distraction, and then it remembers me that okay, I'm somehow different and wrong. Because this pain is like always there.
So the pain is just a reminder of being different and wrong. The pain doesn't in itself mean that you're different and wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So again, because we're on limited time today, I would wonder if there's a relationship between feeling that you're different and wrong. I wonder if hidden in that somewhere is the sense that experiencing love is not allowed, or experiencing nurturance is not allowed, or can't do it for some reason or another. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would be curious about, but we can pick this up another time if you'd like.
So then theoretically speaking, you say that for most of the people it works to practice those two things at the same time, like you would have coherent therapy session and then at the same time tune into fundamental consciousness, and then maybe fundamental consciousness helps you while deconditioning the mind.
Okay. Okay. So I know we're at the end here. I just want to make sure I'm not bumping up against anything else on my calendar. Just give me 1 second. Okay, we've got some time. I have a little bit of time if you guys do. So I think I'm gonna answer what you're asking me, and I'm gonna answer using a personal anecdote. I went to a Reiki healer, and in that session, something was coming up because she was doing work on my heart center, and I realized that I had a constriction in my heart center, and I needed to do something about that, or I wanted to do something about it. So I asked her. This is me working in the Reiki session with her, but also applying what I know about coherence therapy. I said, "Can you tell me, as you've got your hand on my chest. Can you tell me that you care about me? Would that be okay? And it was like a very vulnerable thing for me to ask, and feeling nervous and self-conscious and all that. But nevertheless, I knew that's what this block was blocking. I had something inside of myself that wasn't allowing that for some reason. And I had done enough work such that I was like, I saw what it was. And in that moment, I was willing to let go of it. Right. And willing to be open to having just that experience of letting somebody, a healer, somebody in a safe setting, express that to me and be able to take it in. And of course, I clarified that this is something that I was just asking her on a professional level, and I wasn't gonna ask her to take her home with me or anything, take me home with her or whatever. And so she said, yeah, on a soul to soul level, I care about you. And it was difficult to let it land. I still felt myself resisting. So I had to ask her again to say it again. And then I could feel my heart center open. I could feel the constriction open. But it really took some allowing to let that go. So is there anything in your world that you feel like you could let go of so that you could allow these kind of caring vibes from others to land upon you?
Probably.
Okay. All right. So that's how these two domains interact. I've heard theories that I think are probably true, that because part of us is this immortal soul that isn't really vulnerable to anything, when we go through that whole forgetting process and land here in physical bodies that are preoccupied with survival and resource acquisition and feeling afraid all the time and feeling that things are scarce and there's not enough of this to go around, there's not enough of that, there's not enough love to go around, all these kinds of fears and beliefs that I feel like they do come from that survival level that really does come from the physical body in a way, right? And it comes from our kind of human level of consciousness. I think part of the work of embodiment is really helping our ordinary human level of consciousness relax the sense of imminent threat and going to be hurt and don't deserve love and all of that. To be able to, in the moment, do what we can to let that go or to relax that so that we can really take in those, if you want to call them higher spiritual vibrations or whatever. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much.
Okay, sure. All right. So anybody else have questions, or do you want to talk about things that maybe that you're looking to shift perhaps, or that you haven't been able to shift for a while, or that you'd want to be able to shift in a course like this? Yeah, Lenny, go ahead.
Yeah, it just came to the recognition about needing to reach how I can have the experience of coming home without having to die to do it.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yep.
Because it's like part of my system looks at dying as a way out of the pain.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds like a really important recognition. And my sense is that's where the work is at, right? That's where the work is at. Yeah, because I'm sure everybody here, when we all die, we're gonna go through the cosmic car wash, and that's gonna be really nice. But why not do it while we're here? Right? Bernadette Roberts said that in her view, the body isn't actually a limitation. It's the form of consciousness that is related to the body that is what obscures the light of divinity and the true nature of the soul and so forth. In my view, it's the mental models level, right? That subconscious fears level. Those don't have to do with the physical body so much as they have to do with a deep level of the mind. Okay. Anybody else? Questions, comments, or feedback before we wrap up for today? Anything that if you did a course like this, that you wanted to help you resolve?
Just a practical question, Michael. Yeah, not quite sure at the moment, but if we signed up for the whole thing, I'm aware there would be at least one session that I couldn't do. Would we get the recordings?
Yes. Yeah, you get recordings of all of them, right, if you signed up for all of them. And if you signed up for some of them, then you'll get those recordings specifically, but not others. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the goal of this class, once again, is both to create a nurturing space where we can do a very powerful, delicate, and deeply nurturing level of work, right? Without really doing work. I'm not going to put you guys to work. It's more like putting everybody to rest as a form of work. Okay. So the other thing is empowering you with skills that took me a long time to learn, but I think can be simplified quite easily. They can be simplified down into core elements. Like when we're talking about a specific symptom, we're looking for what the mind is actively doing, or what the mind is actively doing that's enacting a function, right? So we'll do a deep dive into that. When we're getting into non-dual territory, I think that realization process wise, or when we're talking about body going through the felt sense, the biggest hurdle that most people have is getting out of their thinking mind, going deeper than the thinking mind. So we'll do quite a bit on that, to get out of the thinking mind, to open the chakra points. We didn't quite get to that today, but to open to a very subtle level of energy, a breath-like quality. We're going to be doing some breath work to open the chakras. And in terms of, opening to divinity, there's some exercises that we can do there also that open us up to grace. And we'll just see what happens. Right? Okay. Any last anything before we conclude for today? All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for showing up. This has been a real treat for me, and I hope to get this out to you by this weekend. Okay.
All right.
Thank you so much, Michael.
You're welcome. Oh, and if I don't hear from you guys, have a happy holiday, whatever holiday you celebrate. And I'm gonna be off for 2 weeks this holiday season, so I'll be hopefully get a ton of admin work, and which means interesting interviews and that sort of thing that I haven't gotten to for a while. I'll have all that stuff up to send to everybody. So, okay. Take care, everybody. Happy holidays. Lots of love, and hope to be in touch soon. All right.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.